You are now listening to Handsome Reads. Good evening, beautiful people. Welcome back to another. Who am I kidding? We both know that's not my speaking voice. Welcome back, beautiful people, to another episode of Handsome Reads. I am, of course, your host, SKA Obasi, blessed with the honor and the privilege to bring you yet another episode of Army of Sin. A couple announcements before we move on. In an effort to eventually have this series picked up by any of the major streaming platforms or companies, I would like to offer you the simple mission, if you choose to accept, of sharing our series with your own social media. Additionally, you can follow for bonus content on Instagram and TikTok at Handsome Reads, all lowercase, and catch video podcasts on YouTube. If you're already on the YouTube channel, well, say no more. No more words need to be said. Audio episodes are uploaded on Thursdays at 5 p.m., while you can catch the video version on YouTube on Sundays at 6 p.m. That being said, I hope that you have been having a splendiferous day. I pray that if you have any kinks in your neck, you roll them out at just this moment as we get ready to dive back into the thick of it. This episode finds us picking up where we left off with Henri de Noma leaving with the Archangel Gabriel. Today's episode is titled Conversations Between Immortals. Location: a hospital. Henri de Noma landed unceremoniously in a heap, legs unable to support his frame. How undignified for the so-called Dark One, he thought to himself. We are cloaked. Take your time to gather yourself. Gabriel's soft voice came somewhere over his shoulder. Henri let out a shuddering exhale, not caring if Gabriel saw him in his current state. Two things were for certain. Judging by the piece of vision he experienced back at the warehouse, Gabriel, at this moment, could easily wipe the floor with him. Secondly, she possessed a weird sense of honor. After all, it would do her nothing to grant him a brief reprieve. White dots danced through his field of vision, the cold floor holding echoes of sadness that chilled him to the bone. Rolling onto his back, he observed the long corridor, trying to ascertain some idea as to just where it was Gabriel had transported them both. Up ahead hung a sign that read, Maternity Ward. Ah, a hospital, he thought. Sitting up, he absorbed even more information. The paint of the walls was in no way uniform, splashes of fresh paint showing up beneath the glare of the flickering fluorescent bulbs above. Head finally beginning to clear after a series of deep breaths, he pushed himself to his feet, pointedly ignoring Gabriel's outstretched hand. It was one thing to travel sick, another altogether to accept aid in coming to his feet. That would be more than undignified. That act in itself would be the nail driving into the coffin regarding the disparity in power between both beings. Bracing one palm against the wall as a fresh wave of vertigo threatened to plant him once more on the ground, Henri breathed deep. The smell of crisp, freshly cut lemons flooded his senses, dispelling the nausea brought on from their method of travel. After all, it had been eons since he had travelled via wing. He swiveled his head to pin Gabriel with an accusing look. She did things like this, dancing the line between treating him as a now immortal enemy and that of a once closest comrade. She shrugged, all four of her wings moving with the gesture, before they snapped inward to disappear out of sight. Presence of wings or not, she was still very much an archangel, the silver glow of power set deeply beneath her skin. Come now, let us complete the viewing, she commanded, sweeping past him, leather boots making little sound across the polished tiles that led into the hospital wing that served as a temporary home for those newly born. The smell of new life greeted Henri's senses first. Then came the chorus of wailing. His eyes scanned the room, an expression of calm warming the tired lines of his face. Tiny pairs of arms and legs flailed as the newborns did their individual dances of celebration, ready to take the world by storm. Yet, not having a single clue as to what that phrase meant. Peace seeped beneath the skin. The preparations for war, the previous melee, all sense of time, everything ceased to exist for this brief intermission. This was who he was meant to be, a being of profound peace. Shaking his head to clear himself of the gentling aura, Henri reminded himself that he was, after all, in the presence of one of the most powerful archangels to ever be created. Since he was in no shape to put up any form of defense, energy levels severely depleted after his run in with the younger ones, he had no option but to see just what Gabriel had planned. The sooner he could be out of here, the better. For now, her only focus lay on the newborn nestled in the crib at her side. This is the one, she spoke, softly into the sudden hush as all other babies went quiet. How certain are you? Henri asked. Gabriel offered no rebuttal, simply staring at him through pupils the color of stainless steel before leaning closer to where the child slept. What designation is she? Henri asked in equally hushed tones as this baby, with eyes tightly shut and swathed in bright pink robes, made not a sound. The first one we have had in over 25 years. Hope. Will she survive? Henri asked. She must. This is why you are here. You are mistaken. You cannot. Yes, brother mine, Gabriel interrupted. You are not here only in the capacity of witness. Bind yourself to the child. And if I refuse? I may be forced to rethink holding the young hunters at bay, Gabriel offered in the most reasonable of tones before straightening to her full height. Trust Gabriel to have an ulterior motive, he thought to himself. The clock is ticking and we both have other matters to attend to. Of that I am certain. As you wish, Henri conceded. She shifted around to allow him space at the side of the glass box, no bigger than a fish aquarium. The newborn's eyes opened slowly, as if having felt the weight of two pairs of eyes looking upon her. Her eyes zeroed in on Gabriel's serene features, her newborn curls fine and ginger brown in color. The sleeves of the pink one piece in which she was clad rolled up to expose the cream of her skin, material stretching slightly as she reached upward, as if to touch the faces hovering above her. Her skin, which would eventually grow a darker shade than her hair as it absorbed the life giving sun, shifted along the soft cotton. Beneath the bright gaze of her smoke grey eyes, the two immortals stood frozen. The baby giggled. Gabriel's face broke into a smile. This time, her smile was genuine, holding no promise of sweet pain or retribution, merely adding even more purity to her already polished face with its silver dusted lashes. The baby gave a shocked pause as Gabriel's smile grew wider before her face scrunched up, the quiet before the storm. Your smile, Gabriel, Henri reminded. The purity of it is too much. The child, being an innocent, would have only shed tears of joy, a much better reaction than that of adult mortals, who were known to curl into fetal positions on the rare occasion they had witnessed that of an angel's smile. The purity of Gabriel's smile was even said to draw joy from the depths of battered souls as they wept in confused bliss. Still, Henri had had enough of screams and wailing voices to last a lifetime. He was determined to avoid any more at all costs. Sleep, baby, Gabriel whispered, cutting off the tears of joy that would have leaked out before bringing a cupped hand to her own slightly parted lips. A glow dyed a gentle purple, the color of the archangel's inner light, suddenly appeared in the palm of her hand. Holding that same hand over the now sleeping child, she slowly opened her fingers as the essence of her angelic power landed as gently as a snowflake on the babe, only to disappear, absorbed through the young child's pores. Gabriel took a step back to become a silent presence at Henri's shoulder, acknowledging his turn at the proverbial batting plate. Drawing his hand to his own mouth in the same manner as Gabriel did, Henri's lips parted to exhale a minute fragment of his own essence. This marking of a heavenly virtue by both members of the angelic plane had never been done before. Who knew what the ramifications of this act would be? Holding the fleck of energy, the color of the setting sun, he held open his fingers, thus controlling the wisp of energy as it moved across the flat of his palm to rest at the tip of his finger. Placing that finger on the sole of the newborn's tiny foot, Henri traced the cotton clad limb lightly, drawing a squirm and a smile from the sleeping child. The energy disappeared at his final command, now absorbed into the newborn babe. Henri's features grew pensive as he stared at the fragile innocent who now housed energy created by two immortals. The baby's skin seemed radiant and intensely golden. Her fine curls turned to an even lighter shade of brown as her lashes flew open, Fear crept into her eyes for the first time in her brief existence, as curious, worried eyes searched both faces for an explanation of this new sensation. Henri's hand never made it to the child, as Gabriel's slender but powerful hand caught his forearm in a vice like grip. Stay your hand! She can die! Let me at least rid her body of my energy, Henri reasoned in the same hushed tone. She will live. She must, Gabriel reiterated, fiercely, as she too willed the child to survive. Mouth parting in soundless appeal, the newborn's eyes shifted through a kaleidoscope of colors, while her skin continued to glow golden. The exact silver of Gabriel's aura glazed her eyes before melting into a bright violet, which was in turn swept over by the burning, sunset colored orange of Henri's essence. The golden glow that flushed her skin began to fade from her lower body, climbing higher and higher up her tiny limbs. Twin energy sources bled into eyes, which finally settled into a unique pattern of flecks of purple and burnt orange, etched within smoky grey pupils. Just as Gabriel had hoped, the infant's confusion gave way to comprehension as her body began to assimilate the gift of their energy. Now that she was calm once more, the breath that Henri held slowly began to hiss out of his deflating lungs. The infant seemed even more beautiful than before as she stared at them through the eyes of an old soul. No, little one, Henri advised, clutching the edge of the glass box until it spiderwebbed in the center. You know nothing still. She will be fine. Won't you, little one? Gabriel asked, smiling down at the little child once more. This time, however, the child's reaction was different. Shock at the purity and power contained in the archangel's smile still caused her eyes to go wide in wonder, but she simply smiled in return, her own toothless grin in place as she reached upward. No, Gabriel said, refuting the little one's attempt to be cuddled, before turning away from the babe to brush past where her immortal compatriot stood. Our work here is done. Henri closed the door behind him with a quiet snick. The cries of hungry newborns seeped beneath the door, their previous silence at Gabriel's and Henri's presence ending as soon as they left the room. Henri made his way to her side as she stood looking through the sheet of glass back into the room from which they had come. You know that they are doomed. Henri inclined his head towards the direction of the rows of children, some awake, some asleep. You say that in the face of all this? You forget, brother. There was a time a balance existed, she replied. This is the first heavenly virtue born in over 2 decades, she continued, before reaching up to loosen the tie in her hair, the mercury strands cascading to touch her shoulders. How very human of you, he thought to himself, before replying out loud. Even the tiniest of light can penetrate the darkness. I know that you search for something. What is it you hope to accomplish? What is necessary? Henri replied. This path, She turned to him, eyes aglow with barely contained power. You will fail. So be it. But I will not be stopped from trying, he countered, even as a fine crack sped up the middle of what was supposed to be shatterproof glass. I should end you, Gabriel replied tiredly, after a very pregnant pause, the fierce glow gone as quickly as it had manifested. Henri said nothing, simply tracing the crack in the glass as before his eyes it began to fade as though it had never been. His fingers clasped the round face of the pocket watch as he attempted to plan his next course of action. Still you defend them, she spoke into the quiet. Warm breath frosting the glass, gaze once more on the room of infants. Still, Henri replied. A gentle breeze kissed the back of his neck. A rustle of feathers reached his ears, Gabriel's silvery wings reappearing as a sign that their meeting was nearing its end. There would be no farewells. This accord between them both strange and understood. Turning toward the entrance as she strode off ahead of him, Henri stiffened as he noticed Gabriel had paused, palms spread against the wooden door, barely holding itself up in its frame. Do you even know why the young ones come after you? There will always be those that seek the glory of pursuing me. I am, after all, the Dark One, he replied mockingly, head cocked to one side. They pursue you due to what was done to Michael. Ah, Michael, a name he had not heard for many moons, and a name he could have done without hearing for many more. Keeping a grip on his facial expression, he warned, if they return to hunt me, I will not show restraint. Gabriel turned to stride back towards him, the span of her wings such that the tips brushed the sides of the wall, flecks of old paint falling to the floor in her wake. Gabriel reached out her hand as though to cup the side of his head and pause, face awash with conflicting emotions. For Gabriel felt, and seeing her brother in this state, no matter his betrayal, resonated deeply within her. Duty, however, allowed her to maintain composure, and when she spoke, it was toneless. Your job here is done. Feel free to return to whatever it is you and your friends pass the time doing. Henri stared after her at the proud stiffness of her posture as she walked with her wings held tightly about her body, tips barely grazing the ground, leaving behind another trail of old paint flecks. Your aid is in the ward above where you stand. Under the alias Benjamin Jones came a voice along a mental pathway rusty from lack of usage. Henri collapsed to the floor, legs no longer able to sustain him now that Gabriel had disappeared from sight. The press of exhaustion weighed heavily upon him as darkness began creeping into the corners of his vision. As unconsciousness embraced him, he saw a bare foot, swathed in the purest black smoke, step into his field of vision. What have you done, sire? The deep bass of the shadow warrior reached his ears as he felt himself lifted in strong arms. How undignified indeed. End of episode. Thank you so much for stopping by and sharing what I hope has now become a relaxing morning, noon, evening, or night with me. Do enjoy the rest of your time, and I will see you again for another episode of Handsome Reads. Until next time, however, love and light.